an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Gravity Falls, Season 1, Episode 1, Tourist Trapped. In this episode, this was full of surprises. First of all, I did not know that Gravity Falls was animated. Second of all, I did not know it was going to be funny. Third of all, I didn't know that it was basically like what if we had actual monsters in the Twin Peaks universe? And overall, I just found this to be a fucking delight. Totally charming. And I really, really, really want to watch the next one. Thank you very much to Melanie for commissioning this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So, yeah, Melanie, I did not know that this was an animated show. When you asked me if I'd ever seen it, I had no idea what it was. You may have mentioned at some point that it was animated, but I don't remember. And the title, Gravity Falls, is the kind of title that I would expect to be on a, kind of emo teen show. You know, something that's sort of like Riverdale, you know, something like that, where it's like we're going to be a little bit over serious and we're going to put our teens in some situations that are just so unrealistic, but we want the show to star young people. And so we're going to be putting teens in very adult situations and just act like that's normal. And, I don't even think, and this is what's so funny about preconceived notions, is that almost 100% of the time, you don't even realize that you have them. Like if somebody had asked me what I was expecting from Gravity Falls, I would have said, oh, I have no idea what this is about. And yet, I had those expectations in my head, and they were very specific. But even within those specific expectations, to me, there was still a lot of room to explore and do something totally different. And when people commission episodes, I have my friend Candace, friend of the show Candace, who is in charge of handling the Airtable to make sure that that is updated. And she also creates the events on Facebook. So a lot of the time, I don't even see the banner images for these events until the day that they're up. And I have not been the one to explore the whatever images come up in the image search when you look for it to make the banner in the first place. So imagine my surprise when I went to make a bigger banner image for this event, because the one that Candace had up was just not quite high resolution enough. And everything that came up when I searched for it were animated stills, and it was only 5 minutes before the live watch was going to start, so it wasn't like I spoiled myself, weeks ahead of time or anything. It was 5 minutes before, and I was like, oh, this is totally different than what I thought. Melanie says, kind of wanted it to be a surprise, and I didn't know if you would form an opinion before watching. Yeah, I mean, I have nothing against animated shows. I think some of Steven Universe is one that's often brought up because it's just so progressive. I think animated shows can allow for a lot of creativity that we aren't really receptive to in our live action, sitcoms and, dramas and whatever. But I won't lie and say that I don't have a slightly lower expectation of content when I realize that something is animated. It's just a prejudice that I have, and it's not something that's conscious, and I don't even really have any sort of reason that I can discern for it. There's nothing that I expected more of, and then it turned out to be animated and it was no good, that I can point to as being this was the moment where I stopped trusting animated movies. I just don't really get interested a lot of the time when stuff is animated, because I have always been somebody who, part of what's so big for me about unspoiled and watching shows the way that I do is live actors provide a sort of insight into characters based on like tiny movements and facial expressions and the way they're able to depict scenes of really intense emotion. And so I think that's really what it is because I'm so into like the psychology of characters. I find that a lot easier to like access with actual live actors. But I get so fixated on that sort of content that it will like blind me to the value of content that is still emotional, but it's not, you know, it's done in a very different way. And in a lot of ways, when there's a show that's meant to be family friendly, sometimes it can be more emotional because you know that whatever child might be watching this won't necessarily have the context for it that you have now as an adult. So there's almost like a combined nostalgia and bittersweetness to watching something as a grown-up, even if it's not, you know, you're not revisiting it from when you were a kid. This is new stuff to you as an adult. And there's also like, you know, the aspect of knowing that this stuff for children was illustrated and created by adults. So they're informing whatever they are creating with their own experiences and their own desire to get a certain message across. And in that respect, I feel like there can be a real, what's the word I want? There can be a real sort of nuance and poignancy to animated stuff because of the fact that you can feel this desire from the adults to really get something across to children who might not have the vocabulary to understand it yet. And I'm saying all of this right now, not really saying this about Gravity Falls specifically, because this is not an episode that's filled with like lessons or nuance or really, you know, like not right now. I have a feeling that this show has the potential for that, but this episode does not do that. I'm just saying that that is something that I find really particularly moving. And one of the things that comes to mind that I wasn't interested in, but that somebody recommended to me that I watched and I was like, wow, that was a lot, was Inside Out. That is one of those movies where you are going into it thinking it's going to be kind of like a fun romp. And then you're kind of blindsided by how adult it is, really. It's a very adult concept being broken down into its simplest elements and presented for consumption by kids who will understand parts of it and not all of it. And thus it's going to have a rewatchability throughout their lives that's going to mean more and more and more as they continue to grow. And it's things like that that I find really like I need to be better about keeping an open mind with this kind of thing, because it's just, I just sort of immediately I'm trying to even like understand where that comes from, because like I said, oftentimes with stuff like this, I can really point to something specific that I was like, and this just wasn't really good. And I had my hopes up, and then it sort of caused me to lose interest in the genre entirely. But you know what I think it is? So many things that people have recommended to me that were animated were actual like anime. And I have not had good luck relating to anime or really feeling an emotional connection to anime films. I'm sure there are some out there that would prove the exception to the rule, but I think that's part of where, like, even though this is not anime and so many other things that I've sort of dismissed were not anime either, I have an association with anime as being something that's like marketed more towards adults and is allegedly supposed to be more of a grown-up story, and in every experience I've had with it utterly fails at that. And thus I have this like, if an adult recommends something to me that's animated, even if it isn't anime, I have that sort of association with it, I think. Melanie says, I mean, it did remind kids to fasten your seatbelt, so there's a lesson right there. Do you know what? I noticed that when he says that, like, there's a real break taken for him to, like, fasten your seatbelt, and he stops and, like, looks at her and waits for her to do it before he takes off, which I found just precious. So anyway, Gravity Falls. I just wanted to, like, give you guys an idea of where I'm coming from on this, because as far as I can remember, this is the very first animated show I have ever covered for anything Spoil Me or Unspoiled altogether, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, if you remember something that I don't. But yeah, so this is just completely off the beaten path. It's a totally different, it's a huge change. And Melanie had asked me before she commissioned it, if it would be possible, since these episode booking blocks cover an hour of time, since these were shorter episodes, it would be possible to do 2 of the episodes of the show per Spoil Me episode. And I was reluctant at the time to commit myself either way, because something like Dairy Girls is only 20 minutes long, but there is so much to unpack in each episode, because there's a bunch of like cultural and historical information that I find fascinating, that I want to talk about ad nauseum. And plus, there were always a lot of people in the chat for Dairy Girls who were actually from the UK. And there was like a lot of sort of back and forth that happened with them during those episodes that took a lot of time as well. So even though those were only like 20-minute episodes of television, I had no problem getting an hour of content out of talking about them. But I was just, I had never seen Gravity Falls. Like I said, I had no idea what it was. So when she was asking me, I just really wasn't, I was like, well, I mean, maybe, but I don't really know what the content is on this and if that's going to be really squeezing it or not. As of right now, with the way this first episode went, I think doing 2 per is fine. If there's ever a time where I'm starting to feel like, okay, because we're getting to know these characters more, the story is getting more complicated, things are getting a little denser, it's actually taking longer to talk about them than it did, maybe I will change my mind back again. But for right now, upcoming Gravity Falls episodes, I think, will cover 2 episodes each. And Melanie has mentioned in the first commission, in the information, she specifically asked me to avoid looking at episode titles. So I, like I said, don't set up the events for upcoming episodes. And I think that Candace does look up event titles and puts them in the information for that event. So I think that I will get in touch with her to ask her to update those if there are upcoming ones. But I am going to make an effort to follow your instructions, Melanie, and not look into titles coming up. And because I know how that can be. Titles of episodes can really give a lot away. And it's something that I understand why creators, like if you come up with a great title and you just really want to use it. But in this sort of like binge culture that we have with shows now, it can ruin things a little bit. So, I'm just really going to try and avoid that. So just keep that in mind, anybody. If you're going to be messaging me or anything about these, and it's about an episode that's coming up, don't say a title or anything. All right, so this episode starts off with basically like a Ferris Bueller-esque, like, you may wonder how we got here. We start off with our 2 main characters running away in a golf cart from a creature that is chasing them through the woods and throwing whole trees at them. And that cold open is followed by opening credits that are really just so beautiful. This is one of the things that I have always been a bit of a sucker for, is really goofily simple cartoonish characters in the foreground with these like gorgeous painted scenes in the background. And this whole intro is just the kind of an overarching look at what we wind up finding out from the intro. So we have our main characters are Dipper and Mabel. And Mabel is voiced by an actress that I'm familiar with, and I should have looked up her name before I started this, but she's from SNL. She's in a bunch of stuff, and she often plays somebody who's like borderline psycho, like maybe is doing a bit of a single white female thing and trying to copy somebody, or is just not getting over an ex, something like that. And once I realized it was her doing the voice, it became like 1,000% more fun for me. I don't remember the like Dipper's voice being familiar. So I do not know who it is that's doing his voice. And then there's their Uncle Stan, who is always wearing one of those fezzes like it's supposed to be from the like Masons kind of thing. And there is like a symbol on the front of it that makes me think that that's going to be something, especially given how this episode ends. But we will talk about that shortly. And we find out basically what Dipper tells us is that his parents, him and Mabel's parents, decided that we could use some fresh air. And we see the two of them, you know, playing with toys with, I think he's got like a Game Boy or a DS or something like that. And their parents saddle them with sleeping bags and backpacks and put some sunblock on their noses. And then send us up to Gravity Falls, Oregon, to stay with their Uncle Stan, who has this place in the woods called the Mystery Shack. And the Mystery Shack is, Melanie says of Stan's symbol on the front of his fez as, I can't unsee the symbol as a goldfish cracker. I can see that. I thought of it as like a crescent moon attached to like a full moon, but I am big on like moon imagery, so it makes sense that my mind went there. But yeah, the Mystery Shack is basically, it's a, you know, the title of the episode is Tourist Trapped. Like, that's exactly what it is. It is a tourist trap filled with nothing nonsense that he assembled from shit he found at like garage sales and then pretends is indicative of something of the area or a really mysterious find that he just stumbled across in the woods. And I think that there's probably a backstory to a lot of it that like, you know, so-and-so found this. I didn't find it, but they came and brought it to me because they know that I specialize in these sorts of things and I collect all of these mysterious objects. So they were just rocks that are shaped like faces. And there's one of the worst jokes in the entire world, which was instead of Sasquatch, it's pronounced Sasquatch. And it's like it's a Bigfoot who's wearing tighty whitey underwear. It's just that kind of thing. And the depiction of the gullible, gormless travelers who are stumbling into his place, somehow impressed with like the total bullshit on display here and willing to pay for bobbleheads of Uncle Stan, the shyster. Like, it's just really funny to me. I love this setup. It's just a gold mine in terms of figuring out like different moments and plots and weird items that he might uncover that, like, you know, I just really like this as an extra character in some ways of this show. I think it's a smart setup. And we get to know Dipper and Mabel's characters a little bit more here. So Dipper is a lot less excited about coming out here than his sister. He's looking around, seeing the cracks in everything a little bit more, just a lot more aware of like what a shithole this place is. And it feels like his sister is meant to be younger than him. And she is just so much more positive and looks on the bright side so much more and is willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, it doesn't feel like she's a dummy. It's not like that. It's just she's so sweet-natured in a lot of ways that it doesn't occur to her that somebody might be like, you know, lying to her or have an agenda or something like that. And also Mabel is boy crazy. And I loved this detail because I feel like it's a really lovely thing to see a character who is really interested in getting into a relationship but is not sexualized. Mabel is walking around in most of this episode. She's got like this giant oversized turtleneck sweater. She's wearing flats with socks and just generally sort of looks like a goof. but she's still super into boys. And there is nothing about her look that is ever treated as if it's like, you know, well, if you want to be interested in boys, you're really going to have to change what you look like. She's still putting herself out there. She's interested, but she's not there's not like any sort of, like I said, sexuality to it necessarily. And I really appreciate that because I feel like female characters are so rarely allowed, especially in stuff that's geared towards kids, to be interested in boys, because it's meant to be like a sort of signal in writing that if a girl is too interested in boys, that she is either a ditz or maybe she's a slut / simply like too willing to go along with what boys tell her and too willing to change herself in order to appeal to boys, or kind of like somebody who is not to be trusted because she's like willing to backstab her friends for the sake of boys. There's just, in media for kids, there's a lot of baggage regarding being interested in the opposite sex as a girl. I'm not even going to get into the baggage of being interested in the same sex as a girl, because that's pretty much non-existent, let's be honest. And I really appreciate the fact that she is allowed to have a whole montage of her just like low-key throwing herself at a bunch of dudes in a way that is so like endearing, you know, and she's so straightforward and open about it. And her brother is worried about her in that he knows that, you know, some people lie and that that's just a fact of humanity. But there's never a feeling when he's like worried about the guy that she starts dating who turns out to be a bunch of gnomes. I'm sorry, guys. But there's never a moment where it feels like he's being possessive of her in a condescending way. It's never like, hey, stay away from my sister. Like, he's never telling her, you shouldn't be talking to so many guys. There's no judgment around it. And there's no possessiveness as if she's like belonging to him in some way first. It is simply him worrying about her welfare in a very pure way. And I really, really appreciate this. I just don't know how many of you are aware of how rare it is to see this kind of character. So anyway, getting ahead of myself a little bit here. There is also a goat, which I don't know that we get the goat's name at any point through this episode, but I love this goat like weirdly sort of just turning up here and there at moments that don't feel like there should be a goat there at all. And then we get the introduction of Uncle Stan, great Uncle Stan, who in the intro, when Dipper is sharing how he has not really warmed to Gravity Falls right away the way his sister has, we have Stan sneaking up on him wearing a scary mask in the middle of the woods. So that really gives us an idea of what Stan is like. And I am super interested in what the fuck is up with Great Uncle Stan, because his look is bananas. Like, just everything that's going on with the illustration of him. He's got this weird, soft, round nose that's like, there's like lines drawn on it that I think are meant to convey broken blood vessels that people get when they drink way too much. And his nose is like totally different color than the rest of his face. He has a eye patch, but also glasses. He has the fez that has like a tassel hanging off the back, which constantly confused me into thinking that he had a ponytail. And I kept having to be like, no, that's the hat. Right. And then he's wearing like a bolo tie with his suit, and he has a cane that has an 8-ball at the top of it. There's just a lot, okay, with his costume. It's amazing. And I wasn't really sure what to think about him because he's presented as being such a swindler. You know, that initially I was kind of like, is he just going to be somebody that's like terrible to be around and kind of insufferable? But then there's a moment later in this episode where he does something that's like kind of affectionate, and it's just clear that he actually really does like and care about these kids. All he is afraid of is showing it, but he's going to do his best, you know, and we all know people like that. My dad was like that. He had a really hard time like expressing that he loved me, and it took me a long time to understand that when he would like change the oil in my car or things like that, that was him doing it as best he knew how to. And that's what I feel like Great Uncle Stan is like. So, and again, guys, I mentioned this while I was doing the live watch, but I did not realize how many memes and reaction GIFs there are from this show specifically. So many, so many of the moments in just this episode I have seen used as reaction GIFs a million times in various places. Like the note that Mabel sends to that kid that was like, "Do you like me?" Yes, definitely, absolutely are the options. I have seen that a few places. The gnome that gets caught up in the rings for the 6-pack. I've seen that a bunch of places as well. Like I am going to be keeping an eye out hard as I watch new episodes to see what else gets pulled from the show, because I had no idea, you know. I always kind of thought that like that Steven Universe was going to be like the show that I saw adults using most in GIFs, other than maybe like The Simpsons. But this show, now that I know where they're coming from, eclipses Steven Universe completely in terms of being used out in the world. Because I think there's like a combination of the humor here is much more explicit than in Steven Universe, which can be a lot more subtle at times. And also in Steven Universe, a lot of the comedy comes from the context of knowing characters better. And in this show, you really don't need a lot of context. The jokes are just funny, and you don't need that backstory a lot of the time. So I think that's maybe why they work like completely independent of anything else. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because there's so many GIFs in this that I just completely like had no idea where they came from. So we have the moments where Dipper, he is sent out into the woods to hang some signs up that point to the Mystery Shack. They're advertising probably for hikers or people who are like, you know, staying in a hotel like through the woods. And as they're like deciding who's going to go and do this, we meet Seuss. I'm not sure what his full name is, but that's what Great Uncle Stan calls him, SOOS. And Seuss is rapidly turning into one of my favorite characters. He is super strange, but I am just here for the fact that he treats Dipper like a person. Like he doesn't treat him like a little kid who doesn't know what he's doing. He's very like, when Dipper's talking to him and is like, "I think my sister might be dating a zombie," Seuss is like, "Yeah, you know, I could see that, but you can't just go around saying that because you need proof. But also, here are several weapons." You know what? This is the kind of attitude that I appreciate. First, take care and be careful and, you know, get yourself some defense if you need it, but also verify, right? I love it. Melanie's saying his name is Jesus. Oh, Jesus, probably. So Seuss for short. Ah, gotcha. If I ever saw a character who looked less like a Jesus, good God. So this is when Dipper goes out into the woods and starts to hang the signs. And there's a clanging sound when he comes to one of the trees. And it turns out that in in that particular tree trunk, it's like it might not be a real tree, period. Or at least that section of the tree is not real tree. And he opens it up and there's like a whole, what do you call it? Like a transistor radio inside, it looks like. There's like even a little tiny TV screen. And he moves a couple of the levers on this thing and it opens a secret, like, what's the word I want? It's a trap door, but like, what do you call that little, I don't know. But there's a book in it that's been left there for a long time, allegedly. Who knows if this book might be super recent. It might be something that got planted for for Dipper to find. But it looks like it's really genuinely old. It's covered in dirt and dust, and there is a hand with 6 fingers on the front of it. And that hand has the number 3 written. So implying that there are other books out there. I would like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that this hand has 6 fingers. The characters are all drawn as having 4 fingers. So what is that about? And he opens it up and it is a kind of a record of all of these weird things that have been happening in Gravity Falls. And it says, it's hard to believe it's been 6 years since I began studying the strange and wondrous secrets of Gravity Falls, Oregon. And there are illustrations of all these different things. Vampire bats with like a description underneath. Floating eyeballs. Are they watching me? Visible only at night. No retinal cord. And underneath it says no response to contact, and that is scratched out, which makes me wonder if there was something that changed in that department. And also the fact that, Great Uncle Stan has one eye apparently missing. That makes me feel like that's something. We get gnomes, dangers unknown, weakness, ? Pointy hats, ! That illustration of gnomes, by the way, is terrifying. Cursed doors, knock, knock, who's there? The forces of evil. Dark energy readings 40% higher this year. Avoid this door on Main Street, and it's a door labeled 13. And almost all of these illustrations, there is a random eye somewhere on the page. It's always in a different place. Like there's an eye drawn on one of the doors. There's an eye like drawn in the middle of one of the circles that's got like a bunch of graphs and stuff. And one of the final pages that he reads in the scene says, unfortunately, my suspicions have been confirmed. I am being watched. I must hide this book before he finds it. Remember, in Gravity Falls, there is no one you can trust. And he closes this book and is repeating to himself, oh, I guess I can't trust anybody. And immediately his sister pops up. He does not share this book with her in this episode. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he doesn't. But it's a really sweet moment later because you can tell he's kind of internalizing what this book says, even though he has no idea who wrote it and if they're right or not. But when she asks him to trust her, he decides, screw this book. I know my sister, and I'm going to do what I need to do. I trust her. And it's a great little, I oftentimes get really frustrated in stories where somebody comes across, like, a mysterious message that tells them to do something and they just ignore it. And I'm like, obviously that message really means something and maybe you should listen, you dumb. But this is one of those cases that I love that he does the opposite. And he's just like, you know what, book? You don't know me and you don't know Mabel. So maybe shut the fuck up. I'm going to listen to her. Melanie says he shows her pages, but he's always holding it. Okay. So he doesn't let her leaf through it and stuff. Gotcha. So he's pretty protective of it. I would imagine I would be too, honestly, having found this thing by myself in the woods. And I love when she comes upon him. What you reading? Some nerd thing? It's just really funny. So, oh yeah, that's right. He says, let's go somewhere private. I forgot. And then he starts showing her some of this stuff. Grunkle Stan. They call him Grunkle Stan. Oh my God. I didn't even pick up on that the first time. That's totally the thing now. Okay. Grunkle Stan says there's nothing weird going on, but according to this book, Gravity Falls has this secret dark side. And when she says, whoa, shut up, and sort of shoves him, at first, I thought that she was fucking with him and that she didn't believe it at all. But the more that I look at the way that Mabel interacts with him, she doesn't really do sarcasm too often. So I think she's genuinely saying, no way, that's crazy. And it's just, I'm so not used to people being sincere and genuine that I don't know how to respond to that. Oh, God. And he says the pages just end like the guy who was writing it mysteriously disappeared. And they get interrupted by the arrival of, quote, Norman, who is going to be taking Mabel out on a date. Oh, Mabel. That moment where he says, I can't believe that you finally got a boyfriend. And she says, I guess I'm just irresistible. And she waves her sweater arms around. I love her so much, guys. I love her so much. It's such a goofy thing. Oh, I cannot express to you how much Mabel is one of my favorite characters of anything ever. Right away. She's the best. And she answers the door, and there is this weird fucking dude standing there, and he has branches coming out of his head, and he's super pale, and he's standing weird and talks weird, and the whole thing is just very suspicious. And Dipper is immediately this guy is not normal, and I have this book detailing all of these different beings in this area. Oh my God, he looks just like a zombie. He's standing just like a zombie. They met in a graveyard. Clearly that's what's going on here. And I can't skip over, though, when he's looking through this book while she goes and answers the door to let, quote, Norman inside. He gets jumped, his grandpa, or his grunkle, my bad. His grunkle interrupts and is like, what are you reading? And he stuffs the book away and pulls out a magazine at random that's sitting there. And he's like, I'm just catching up on Gold Chains for Old Men magazine. Oh my God. That is, I can't, guys, if you want to see me crack up, go watch the live video of me watching this episode for the first time, because I had to pause it. I was laughing so hard. Really, really specific magazines are one of those jokes that just doesn't get old for me, because there are such specific magazines out there, guys. That is such a true thing. Have you guys ever, I love to do vision boards on the 1st of January for setting the tone for what I want the rest of my year to be like. So I'll go to different stores and see what kind of magazines they have to, buy stuff for different subjects so that I have access to different types of imagery. And some of the magazines that I run across, I am just blown away at how fucking specific. It's crazy to me that they are able to keep something running, that there are enough people interested in something that specific, but they exist. And it's just, that joke just got me so bad. So, he shares his concerns to the room in general out loud, and Seuss happens to be there changing a light bulb and overhears and is just listen, I understand your concerns, and I'm not even actually that. I don't think it's that out of the realm of possibility, but you do need to collect some proof if you want to convince her and or anyone else of what you're saying. So he starts following Mabel around with a video camera and filming what's going on. And there are so many moments when Norman just falls flat on his face or flat on his back. And I could, like, once you find out what's actually going on, that somehow makes it all the more hilarious. But yeah, I love what this turned, because it looks like he's a zombie. It never even occurred to me that the show was like tricking me. I figured that was the joke, was that it was super obvious to him that this guy was a zombie and nobody else was really going to believe him. And then it turns out that, like, he's kind of right, that there's something going on, but it's not what he thinks it is. So he tries to, like, keep an eye on her to make sure that she's safe at one point. Norman's, like, coming towards her when he's, like, in a way that looks really threatening. But then the camera pulls back and she's got a daisy chain necklace that he made for her around her neck. Or there's a moment where he's, like, coming towards this window and breaks through it to open it. But it turns out that that's just how he opened the door to let her into the restaurant. There are just all of these different moments of him doing things that look super aggressive and worrisome, but then turn out to be just totally harmless and or hilarious. But Dipper is getting really frustrated because he can't quite find any definitive proof. It's just Norman being really weird consistently, but there isn't anything that you can point to as being absolutely, this guy's a zombie. It's just all weirdness until he starts reviewing the old information on the tape and sees one of Norman's hands fall off. And then he grabs it and puts it back on. I love the fact that when he confronts Mabel about this and says, I don't think Norman's what he seems, her immediate assumption is that Norman's a vampire. And rather than be upset or worried or horrified, she is thrilled because of course she is, because she is a tween growing up in 2018 or 19 or whenever the fuck this was filmed or recorded or whatever. Of course, because there's just a totally different understanding of what it means to be a vampire and be dating a vampire in this day and age. I love it so much. And when he, like, starts to confess to her that he's not what he seems later, and she starts chanting to herself, please be a vampire, please be a vampire. It's just so good. And there's a bunch of, like, little hints as to what's coming, because when Dipper tries to tell her that he thinks that this guy is a zombie, the book automatically opens to gnomes. And, you know, as a viewer, I laughed because I was just like, wouldn't that be crazy if he was just a gnome? Never even entered my head that that was being put there as a clue. And it turns out they're going on a date, later on, and they're going out into the woods. It turns out that Norman is actually, I think, 6 gnomes. I'm going to count once he pulls his disguise hoodie off. And they are looking for a new gnome queen. Apparently, gnome queens are not born, they are made. Very curious. Let's see, 5 gnomes, 1 in each boot, 1 controlling each hand/arm, and then the one on top whose face we have been seeing. His name is Jeff. Here we have Carson, Steve, Jason, and I'm sorry, I always forget your name. Schmebulok. Schmebulok, yes. I died a little bit over that joke. Carson, Steve, Jeff, Schmebulok. Okay, sure. And he presents her with a diamond ring, allegedly. It might be just crystals, I don't know. And is like, so, what do you say? You want to be our gnome queen? And would you join us in holy matrimony? And she's like, guys, I just don't see how this is going to work out. And they're like, oh, yeah, all right. Well, we understand why you feel that way. Nevertheless, we're definitely going to kidnap you and make you into our queen anyway. So, if that's cool. Thankfully, Dipper is on his way to try and rescue her. He has the golf cart. He is armed with a shovel and baseball bat that were given to him by Seuss. I don't remember the name of the other girl that's working for his grunkle, who is, she's, I think, supposed to be slightly older than Dipper is, and she just does not care at all about any of this. Wendy, thank you, Melanie. She, I find very amusing, because I love how, like, he goes up to her and he's like really forceful with telling her he needs the golf cart because he thinks that she's totally going to say no. And then she just does not care and throws the keys at him. And she's like, don't hit anybody. Oh my God. She is hysterical. So they are in the middle of like Gulliver's Travels style, like tying her to the ground when her brother gets there. She is like bashing them to get them away from her because they're very small. It's just that she's been overwhelmed with the numbers of them. One of them that she hits, he hits a tree and has to stop and vomit, and he vomits rainbows. Now, this is returned to at the end of the episode in the credits, and Melanie was like, while I was live watching, Melanie was like, no, don't stop. Go back and watch the credits. During which that gnome continues to vomit for like a full-on 10 seconds, which does not sound funny. It sounds lame as hell. It is hilarious. I was dying laughing. Like, there's something about this show and the timing and the sound effects and the way that they've chosen to illustrate things that makes things work that really, like, don't sound like they would work well at all. So good job on that, guys. And then we have like the whole chase scene start that we saw at the very beginning of the episode where there was some giant creature chasing them. And it turns out it is not a giant creature. It is an assembly of tons of very small gnomes who have figured out how to create, like stand in such a way that they turn into a sort of a transformer-like living thing. And this giant gnome is chasing them through the woods and trying to stop them because they want her to be their gnome queen for all eternity. It is really crazy to me that they want a queen who isn't actually a gnome. Erica says, or Gnome Voltron. Exactly. Thank you, Erica. I don't really know how that works. Like, what do you do as a queen? Do you just give birth to lots of gnomes? Is this like a rape thing? Ooh, I don't want to go down that road at all. You know what? I take it all back. Because that implies that all gnomes are dudes, which is super weird. But anyway, they start chasing them. It is an amazing scene where he stops and makes sure that she has her seatbelt on before they start driving. I would love to actually see this chase scene like done with live action because they are in a golf cart and those do not go that fast. So I have a feeling that if we saw this in, live action, there would be an additional level of real humor to the fact that in this illustration, it looks like they're flying, like they're going like 80 miles an hour. Most golf carts top out at like 35. And I want to see that chase scene. I really just, thinking about it is cracking me up. And these gnomes are really like, we have Jeff, who's like their representative, who seems like he has a pretty good grasp of how to act like a person. But he's the only one, because all of these other gnomes are like feral dogs. Like they're like little raccoons, essentially. And they are depicted from here on out as having like pointy teeth that are razor sharp and these like maniacal looks to their eyes. They're chewing on the golf cart roof and everything. it's just like the fact that they basically have combined the gnomes from Harry Potter that are like, they bite and they're really like, have terrible tempers and are not really like conscious beings in the way that mer people are, but they aren't totally just animals either. And they've combined that concept with making them look like fat little Santa Clauses, as our, sort of legends have it that gnomes look like, which is what Ron makes fun of. And I love the fact that they have decided to just do both with these gnomes. So one of them like attaches itself to Dipper's face like a fucking face hugger, and Mabel saves him by repeatedly punching this gnome until it finally like breaks off of him. This whole thing is just really fun. They come to a like sliding stop in front of the mystery shack, and the poor golf cart is very battered, and they're trying to defeat this thing as if it is one creature, but they have to break it up into its individual parts or else they won't be able to defeat it. I love that we have a cutaway to their grunkle, who is talking to a bunch of tourists about the world's most distracting object, and it's like a spinner, and he says, just try to look away. You can't. And they all sort of like go slack-jawed as they stare at it. And he even says, I can't even remember what I was talking about. I can't lie to you guys. In that short moment of that thing spinning, just the illustration, I definitely had a little moment of like, I think maybe I need a little bit of hypnosis time every now and then. There are apps that do that just have like a spinning thing that you can stare at and space out. So this is when Mabel says to him, please just trust me. I know what I'm going to do. And he agrees to step aside, and she pretends that she is willing to marry them. And she has little Jeff, who's the head of this whole thing, come down and put the ring on her finger. And he says something about how, like, they're going to go off and into the woods, but she stops him and says, you may kiss the bride, which takes him off guard. He was not ready. So he's like, oh, yeah, okay. She gets the fucking leaf blower that she was using earlier, and she had used it to try and practice how to kiss Norman, and it wound up like sucking her face and giving her like a hickey on the side of her face. When she holds it out, he tries to resist being sucked up into it, but he can't. He's like pulled in basically up until his eyeballs. And then she reverses it, and she shoots him like a bullet into all of the other gnomes and breaks it into pieces. Individual gnome-sized pieces that go flying everywhere. The best. Jeff goes sailing off into the trees saying, I'll get you back for this. And the other gnomes have no idea how to deal with like not having somebody telling them what to do. And they just sort of sit there for a second until she takes the leaf blower and blows them away. And then they finally like leave into the woods. And this is when we come across the gnome that gets caught in the 6-pack rings and like lays there. And the goat comes up and grabs him and carries him away. That moment of that gnome getting caught in the 6-pack rings, that is one of those beautiful jokes that does not need to be there. That's not any sort of callback. We didn't see anybody like throwing, dropping their rings of there. It's just a thing that somebody decided to put there for whatever reason. And it is so fucking funny. I really admire whoever wrote this. And it was just all very, very good. So she tells Dipper, I'm sorry for ignoring your advice. I can see that you were just trying to look out for me. And she says, I guess I'm just sad that my very first boyfriend turned out to be a bunch of gnomes. And he says, well, look on the bright side. Maybe the next one will be a vampire. And she's like delighted by this. And then it ends with awkward sibling hug. And they do that. And they both at the very same time get big nervous eyes and just say, pat, pat, and pat each other on the back. So good. Guys, I kept having to like pause while I was watching because the jokes come so thick and fast that I am still laughing and gonna miss them. So I have to like pause and laugh and like give myself a minute before I keep going. It's just very, very well done. So this is when Grunkle Stan offers them a little something from the gift shop for free. He's over here like counting his stacks of money. And yeah, he tries to act like, oh, I just have too much inventory. So I love, and their reactions really depict who they are, right? Because Mabel's immediately like, really awesome. And Dipper's reaction is, oh yeah, what's the catch? Which, good question, Dipper, to be honest. And they go back into the little gift area. He picks out the hat that we see him wearing in all the other illustrations, a little like, blue pine tree on the front. She picks out a fucking grappling hook. I love it. I love it. I love it. And she uses it for the rest of the episode in entirely unnecessary ways. And it's just wonderful. So this ends with a little scene with Dipper writing in the journal that he found and talking about how he had been able to trust somebody after all, despite what this said. And his sister using the grappling hook to, quote, turn out the light, the lantern. And then we go to their Grunkle, who is checking the front door, and then he goes up to the vending machine in his store and types in a special code into the vending machine buttons, and it opens to a secret area of this building. And he has his lantern and he like steps in and looks around to make sure that nobody is seeing. And he's wearing, by the way, a gold chain with a medallion. So that magazine is obviously very necessary to his interests. And then he closes it behind him. So he is involved in something weird. There's yet another eye, like, floating in that scene, by the way. Like, there's eyes throughout this whole episode all over the place. And I'm really interested to see what exactly it is that he's part of here. And that is where the episode ends. And we go to the amazing credits of a gnome who's just vomiting a rainbow for 10 seconds. I'm watching it right now. It's just so good. And it would not be as funny as it is without the sound effect. Like, looking at it, it's funny, but it's not like it is when you get to hear it, which is just... I might make this my my banner image for my Facebook page, guys. I'm just saying. So, I cannot believe I didn't even like try to stretch this out, but I still managed to get an hour out of talking about a 20-minute episode. I don't think that I'll be able to do that from now on, though. So I stand by doing 2 per. This was just super, super fun. And considering all of the other stuff I've covered and how heavy it is very, it's a really big relief to cover something that is this lighthearted, but also really well done. So yeah, many thanks to Melanie for deciding to go out on a limb and commission something that is just so far outside of other stuff that I have covered. She says, so all the episodes have end credit sequences, so maybe turn off autoplay in Hulu. Okay, noted. That's a good call. I actually don't think I even realized that was something that you could turn off until like a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I get really mad about that because there are a lot of end credit sequences on a lot of different shows. Like, you know, Brooklyn Nine-Nine will have them sometimes too. And it's just such a bummer when you can't even really see it. That would happen when we were watching Community as well. So yeah, I will do that. Thank you for the suggestion. So guys, thank you all for having really excellent taste. I just really appreciate all of y'all taking these risks with what you decide to have me watch, because it would be really easy for everything I cover to basically just be like fantasy stuff. And I appreciate that y'all are like wanting me to explore something different, you know? So yeah, thank you, Melanie. Again, really appreciate it. Also, Alex Hirsch, the creator, voices many characters in the show. Okay, cool. And to think I was worried you wouldn't like this. Don't need to worry, girl. I'm definitely rewatching this episode like tonight with Owen because he needs to see it. Although he's going to be mad because I won't be able to watch, I won't be able to binge them. But I'll be able to watch episode 2, right? Oh, I could watch episode 2 and 3. I could watch 2. Yes. Okay, cool. So yeah, this will be fun. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap. Thank you all so much for being here and hanging out with me, and hope you enjoyed the coverage of this, and I'll be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers!
This is an Unspoiled Network podcast.